As I've already covered in part 1, Madlib's alter ego Quasimoto takes center stage of this album. I'm going to go over what Quasimoto's verses mean, but more importantly for the second half of this album, I'm going to cover the samples behind each of these songs because they each tell a unique story. MHB may be one of my favourite tracks off of The Unseen. The samples here include the 1976 track Little Children by Kool and the Gang, which was originally an uplifting song about discovery when young. Open Sesame was the other Kool track, which was a message to widen your perspective and be more loving. This all ultimately links to the song, as Quasimoto here is talking about people spending money frivolously instead of thinking about their own ambitions. Put a Curse on You was actually sampling the 1971 track by Melvin Van Peebles, quite an angry toned song that wished poor luck on his subject. The Quasimoto song actually used this negativity to demonstrate the effect that crack cocaine had on users of the drug and how they changed mentally and physically, as well as its effect on the communities. Even the opening of verse 1 starts talking about the dangerous effects being similar to voodoo and hex magic. But Quasimoto goes a step further, and he talks about how the communities stop breaking down as people lose sight of true beauty and chase dopamine. Track 15 samples the Sun Ra song Astro Black. Sun Ra was an American jazz composer and multi-instrumentalist who played with experimental music. He was a pioneer of the Afrofuturism movement, which had cosmic philosophies. His performances used to have futuristic costumes, and he released over 100 full-length albums and still records to this day. For example, Janelle Monáe is someone who you could say was inspired by him. The track Astro Black itself, with Quasimoto's verse, is more of a braggadocious one. Quasimoto here explains how long he's been rhyming for and uses couplets and plays on vowels. Track 16, Green Power, looks at two things. Green could either represent money, aka the perils it brings, but also questions your own definition of what currency is and the power it has over you and other people. Green could also be talking about weed and how it's ever present in the communities. Madlib opens up on the second verse to really start asking alternative questions about this. For example, stopping the chase of money to observe nature, or finding new things to do every day so you don't lose the touch of novelty. And this is important because in a lot of communities, weed and money is the only thing chased after, not tranquility, not peace. Jazz Cats Part 1 is an ode to, you guessed it, jazz and everyone who paved the way in that genre. I mean, the outro begins with "Anyway, I love my jazz," so you can sort of gauge the respect Madlib has for the genre. The already mentioned Sun Ra gets a shout out in the first line. George Benson was a famous jazz guitarist and singer. Hampton Hawes was a bebop pianist, and so forth. You get the point. He mentions almost everyone on this track, and I implore you to read into each of these names that he mentions. The first verse on its own has over 25 musicians mentioned. Blue Note Records, a famous jazz record label mentioned on the song, is also due to release their own new album soon with many contemporary artists for reference. The first verse in track 18 is actually rapped on by Metaphor, aka MED, who is another rapper signed to Stone's Throw Records. Similar to Astro Black, this is a track where bragging is ever present from both Metaphor and Quasimoto's point of view. He's now called MED, but after being on Lootpack's 1999 album Sound Pieces, he was asked to join Stone's Throw Records by Peanut Butter Wolf, the founder of Stone's Throw. His 2005 album Push Comes to Shove was produced by Madlib, Jay Dilla and Just Blaze for reference, and he's also released many other albums on Stone's Throw, which I definitely will cover at some point, and you should definitely check them out. Track 19 is called The Unseen and is a shout out to all underground rappers. This track has many expansive references thrown on here that would go over your head initially. It went over mine, to be honest. The line "rushed by tacklers" is a NFL reference, while in the later line he talks about the street scene, which was a 1930s black and white film, and then Kiss of Death, which was another film with similar graphic styles released in 1947. There's also a nod to Fred Wesley in verse 2, who was the trombonist for James Brown himself. Track 20 is The Phony Game, which is named after another Melvin Van Peebles track. "You gotta play the game to get the prize" was the original line by Melvin, which is a statement that you must always compromise through empathy to ultimately make people receptive to your point of view. Quasimoto's respins this by then saying you have to be commercial, aka fake in this instance, to get truly rewarded. Individuality conformed is the only path to success as a narrative is what underlines this entire track. While Melvin talked about women and relationships, this track is a device from Madlib to subtly assert his understanding of the very industry he's managed to succeed in. Individuality in this sense is therefore only if it's constructed in the right way, aka fake. Track 21, Astro Traveling, is interesting. There are subtle lines here with all sorts of references. Could astro traveling be referring to the psychoactive effects of substances, but also be speaking of astral projection, where you actually see your soul leave your body to a different dimension? Who knows? There's also a line in the track where he comments on hard drugs like heroin and cocaine and how they destroy lives, and how he'll never touch them and stick to weed. Track 22, Blitz, is a pure instrumental. The main vocal samples used here are Survival of the Fittest by Mobb Deep, which itself was one of the most famous tracks by them. It's a track that talked about the difficulty of the streets and the evolutionary mindset of Darwin that was ingrained in them, which results in the strongest surviving. Survival of the Fittest had a line which said there's a war going on that no man is safe from, which could also be really used to describe anyone. No one's life is perfect, and we're all living a proxy version of the same war, whether that's unhappiness, depression, wanting a better job, or even famine, among others. The background instrumental sample features Maynard Ferguson, who was a famous Canadian jazz trumpeter, also known for his abilities to play in the instruments as high register. Maynard Ferguson also led his own band, which was in its time known as a stepping stone and a place to sharpen your skills from many famous jazz musicians. Track 23, Axe Puzzles, features a sample from the 1974 Mel and Tim song Keep the Faith, which Jay-Z also later sampled himself. This is one of my absolute favourite samples from the entire album because the original is an utter classic. The original song talked about identifying faith and self-belief, which is a powerful message that still rings on 45 plus years later. Axe Puzzles, the Quasimoto track, on the other hand, is a completely opposite track with the self-belief dial turned up 200%. And as a result, it's another braggadocious track which demonstrates and emphasizes Quasimoto, aka Madlib's rhyming abilities. Ending the entire album, you have Discipline 99, Part 1. There are references here to Peanut Butter Wolf, but also Dominique Wilkins, whose jump and all-time great dunking ability is referred to heavily here. This is intertwined with the point on the unexpected, as Gary Coleman was a small child star who you wouldn't really expect to reach the heights of Dominique. He ends with referring to Discipline 99 by Sun Ra, another track off the album Astro Black. You can already tell that Madlib was an ultra fan of Sun Ra. Wildchild has the second verse. He's a member of Loot Pack, the American hip-hop group signed to Stone's Throw. Overall, I think there's no doubt that this is one of the great Quasimoto appearances ever, and it's testament to Madlib that he's able to wrestle so many themes and times together into one comprehensive masterpiece. I'm going to quote Coke Machine Glow, who wrote a brilliant article on him. Released in mid-2000, The Unseen was a realization of Madlib's post-Loot Pack buzz, which he had utilized to slowly build hype for his protege, the helium-voiced Quasimoto. At 24 songs, in just over an hour, it has all the qualities that we know to come to expect from a Madlib production. Scattered brilliance, hazy continuity, sweet-like structure, a constant rush of intertwining samples and breaks, rhymes that emerge lazily from the ether, and all of it coming together to create a pervasive mood, both familiar and disorienting, like staring in the mirror on mushrooms. Roughly, this is a concept album about, ready for it, invisible creatures that convince us to do bad things to ourselves and to each other. Madlib was destined for loneliness. He could never fit in. Even as an artist, his talent's too hard to classify. Make no mistake, The Unseen is a depressing, lonely record. All mournful sax wails, paranoid hallucinations, musical obsession, chemical dependency, regret, barely concealed contempt. So what if Madlib turns these sentiments into a cartoon? What lies beneath this album's spacey goofiness is a despondency, splayed open and manic. One wonders if all that heralded prolificacy is hiding something.